I have a question for you today. How does food and energy independence relate to strong self-governance? And I'm going to start answering that by asking another question. What happens when we rely on others, whether it be individuals or a government or another nation, to provide for our needs? Well, my answer to that would be that we become vulnerable. We are at the mercy or the whims of others who don't necessarily always have our best interests at heart. Doesn't that sound a little bit like some of the issues that pushed the founding of America in the first place? When a king across the ocean was interfering with daily life? Sounds familiar to me. We also become unable to respond in emergencies. If we don't have the supplies to meet the needs during an emergency situation, think about COVID-19 and the problems that came about as a result of that worldwide viral pandemic. Think about the lead times that are necessary to start producing and manufacturing, whether it's growing food or manufacturing parts for vehicles. Whatever it is that our need is, how long does it take to gear up and produce that? If you have a crisis in the dead of winter, you can't grow a garden. And if you didn't grow one last summer, you don't have any canned produce to feed your family or any meat stored to feed your family if you haven't been raising animals. There's a lot of pieces to this puzzle, and we need to think through those issues in America right now. What about the skills? The skills needed to do certain things. We're seeing kind of a resurgence in the trades, and I'll tell you, I'm really glad to see that, because within, say, the last 7 to 10 years ago, as an estate planning attorney, we started seeing business owners who couldn't find anyone to take over their business. They didn't have the skills, HVAC, plumbing. They were literally closing up their successful business at retirement because there weren't people interested in taking over, and people didn't have the skills to come in and do that work. Those are all supply chain issues, and part of that supply chain is the human supply. The skills, the understanding of how things work, and the ability to fix and do things that are required in every household. So we're at risk of losing those skills when we're not being careful about food and energy independence. Relying on others is not a part of self-governance. Self-governance as a city, as a state, as a nation means in part that we are a thinking people, thinking and planning ahead. Bottom line, if we want to be strong, we have to be producers, not just consumers. A few years ago, I was in Jamestown, and we had a tour guide talking through some of these very issues about when Jamestown was a new settlement and they had a hard winter, and the settlers had been reliant on local Indians and whatnot to provide for them, and they didn't have food that they had stocked up on over the course of the winter or over the course of the fall and the summer season. And so that winter of 1609 and 1610 became known as the starving time because they lost, I think, about half their population. Now that's a scary thought, but that's a reality of what happens when we are not careful about our supply chain and doing what it needs, understanding how to produce and take care of ourselves. In modern times, we're going to see the same thing if we're reliant on other countries to provide food, to provide the goods that we need to function on a day-to-day basis, to provide our oil to run our vehicles, our transportation. Just think through some of these problems. We all probably are doing that already, but I want to encourage you to go as far down the supply chain as you can. How do you take care of your family in difficult times when you can't rely on others to provide you with the goods and services that you need? Now, part of the beauty of the American principles of freedom is that our founding fathers thought a lot about these things. And the principles that are in the Constitution and in our founding documents were heavily drafted around the idea of some basic principles of opportunity for all people. Opportunity to be self-reliant, to create businesses, to provide goods and services to their neighbors and their communities, for small business to succeed at the local level, and for that decentralization of power and supply. And I think we need to be rethinking through some of these concepts, reinvigorating that idea of self-reliance and how do we provide at the local level. Some hard questions that we're going to have to answer in the next few years, because we've drifted toward that centralized supply, that kind of socialist mindset of the government will provide for us. Are we too close to that? Are we too close to the problems that type of governance provides or creates? The wisdom and the founding principles of our American structure was pretty amazing. Let's rediscover some of that and get a little more independent, stronger, and able to govern ourselves.